All right, folks, welcome back. We're just going to pick up right where we left off. Now, we had just gotten done talking about ideas of availability, and we kind of came to the conclusion that really, whether or not you lock out every other player once a quest is accepted is going to end up becoming something that's dependent on the quest itself. But I do want to drive something home that maybe got missed in the last video, or maybe I just didn't put enough importance on it, and that is the time-sensitive nature of these limited quests. The idea that I want to make sure everybody's clear on is that what I have in my mind is that every quest that we put together, every mission we put together, is time-based in some form or fashion. There is a time limit. It's just a question of how that time limit is applied. In the case of open quests, that time limit is applied such that as long as this quest is open, you can keep doing it over and over and over until that quest is no longer available and the window is closed to you. The limited ones, you're actually going to get a time limit the moment you accept the quest. So if you have to deliver this package, that package needs to be delivered within 2 hours, or this person needs to be killed within 3 hours, or you need to bring me 75 raptor heads in 26 minutes. You know, something like that, where they're really...
I swear, if I kill a raptor and it doesn't have a head on it, but that head was biting me just 3 seconds before, and if I didn't blast it with a bazooka that blew its head off, I will be so angry. That won't
Why
happen.
hasn't this wolf got any paws?
I'm staring at its paws right now.
It was running
the
around.
least thing they could have done, the least you could do, it seems, is just have, like, you know, there's a mangled head.
Yeah,
That's there.
damaged head.
Dang it, I accidentally hit it with the back end of my sword. Anyway, so... I just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm thinking every mission we have has a time factor. It's just a question of how it's really applied to you. All of these limited quests have a time limit. So let me write that down. Have a set time limit. As soon as you accept a quest, you're given that limit, and if you don't complete the quest in said limit, you fail. Which brings me back over to our little thing of availability. Now, if we were to make quests that could be open for everybody, where you could have as many people accept a quest as you like, and it's really just a question of who gets it done first, yes, you do get that sort of clamoring, people, you know, climbing over each other and pulling each other back and trying to trip each other to make it to the finish line before everybody else. And I'll admit, some part of me likes that. But there are some things that we may want to consider in terms of how this should be handled. Like, first off, should you be able to see how many players are on the quest? Hello? Would you like to be able to see that? Do you have arguments as to whether or not you should be able to know that or not know that?
Well, you know, my approach to most things tends to be to take it back to first principles of what would happen in the real world. And actually, as soon as you said about that sentence just now about people clamoring, climbing over each other, pulling people back to get at the job, it almost makes it sound like it could be an interesting game, not mechanic, but aspect of the game, in that if there was a contract put out on someone, for instance, it would be just that, you know, the word would be put out, and it would be put out to various people. They might not necessarily know who else is on the game, but, you know, an experienced assassin's going to have an idea of who else, you know, is on the job. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if Bourne gets employed, it's probable that somebody's trying to contact the Jackal as well. So I'm going to the books, not the films. I like the books.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
But, you know what I mean? And you know, in the original Bourne mythology, where he is sent out as a decoy, pretending to be the Jackal, to draw the Jackal out. It's that idea that the underworld does know about itself. So yes, you should be able to find out how many people are on the mission, but that should involve going and talking to a tipster in a dive that's an offshoot into a side mission that you could conceivably deal with it that way, whereby you know, there are multiple people, and the first one to get there gets the
Well, I do like the concept of
happen.
somehow bringing skill into it for controlling if you are visible or not visible.
I like putting a stat on everything available.
Because what would be interesting is if you had received a package. So, well, that's obviously a very easy task. Anyone could do that. But the delivery of this package was, you've got 24 hours to deliver it, and it's not in, the destination is not in the current city in which you're in. So you've picked up the package, but this is a very sensitive package, worth a lot of money. It would be very cool if you could be intercepted or, well, killed, and that package could just be stolen, and then whoever just took it would actually have that item. They could put it up on the market or whatever. You could actually have people like pirates that are watching the boards very carefully for people that are taking those sorts of missions. But if your skill level was perhaps high enough, you could, have your identity hidden or something. I'm just throwing out ideas to ways to make a simple quest a little bit more dynamic, where other people could be brought in to try to counter it.
At that point, you have balancing issues.
You do.
Because a level 60 pirate is going to obviously be able to kill every single newbie.
But if he doesn't know who's delivering the package,
surely that's going to be tied up to a certain extent anyway. I mean, I was envisaging, almost without thinking about it, that there would be level exclusion on various levels to stop ganking and similar. I don't know how Jason and...
Again, I'm trying to reach outside of the box as far as the types of the quests that we're putting together to make them where they start out fundamentally sounding like your typical quest. Here, take this package from A and deliver it to B. Now, how could we make it a bit more interesting?
Well, I mean, there always could be stuff like people popping out of somewhere and or NPCs asking you to give the package for a little bit more money than you would have made, or NPC pirates who are instantiated based off your skill level.
See, so we just can't quite achieve what Eve can do, basically. I mean, because in Eve, you could, in a corporation, be asked to deliver a package from one location to another, and if word got out to another corporation that you were on this delivery run, they could take you out and take your cargo.
Yeah, but
I know, it's too realistic. We've got real people involved. It needs to be NPCs. I understand.
Well, though in Eve that is governed by security space. I mean, generally, even if you do take a quest like that, if you're like in 0.7 security space, you're probably not gonna get gagged.
Yeah, you got to use the word probably, though.
You're almost certainly not going to. In the way Eve have set it up, the punitive action that is taken is so out of all proportion to particularly that first, when you've been playing the game for about 3 days and you click the wrong button and then get blown to buggery by the security that turn up.
I mean, let's say there's a level 30 and there's a level 60. Not that I want to use levels in the real game, but the level 30 is going to deliver a package. All right, so you've managed as a level 60 to find out who is delivering the package because the guy didn't have a high enough skill level to mask himself out. But now the cool thing is if the level 30 decides to be cautious, and if there are means in which he could go the slow way, or where he's not registered with any systems anywhere, now it becomes almost impossible for someone to try to track him. I mean, it's just there's ways to, and that is balancing right there, Nelson. That's just ways of making things a bit more interesting.
Yeah, that would work. Or perhaps have I don't know how exactly we're going to deal with paths between cities, but have low security paths and high security paths,
or could it even go outside of that, as in tracking somebody? If somebody goes to a town and uses a kiosk, can we find out that somebody had just used that kiosk if we have a high enough hacking level so that we can track?
It's going to be stored somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, we could make it stored somewhere for sure.
Right. So you could at least see what their activity was, even if you can't necessarily, call up Google Earth and pinpoint their exact location right now, which does lead to some balancing issues.
They charged their credit card in New York. Get on the plane.
Exactly.
And you could even have quests that use those sorts of skills
to track down someone.
An NPC says, "Bring me the patterns of so and so. He's suspected of ganking or suspected of quest hijacking or whatever." That'd be a very interesting.
So I mean, basically, if there was a database of all the different things you'd access, a certain skill could bring up an interface which just draws lines between all those access points, and those lines would form a pattern.
And then, of course, if your skills are high enough so that you can cloak yourself from that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we're getting into very specific.
We are. But I just wanted to use that as an example, though.
We're kind of breaking away a little bit.
Because just in the simple idea of, Zach, take this package from here, 2 states over and deliver it at Johnny's house, if it's a very valuable package, let's say that Zach doesn't know what's in the package, but the reward for it will be, Zach, I'm going to give you $10,000.
Sweet.
Obviously, Zach's going to say, so is this drugs, but...
Well, it's like the film Snatch.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember they had the diamond in the
Yep.
briefcase,
Yep.
and then the guy said, I'll $50,000 for half day's work. Just bring me the briefcase. But all hell broke loose when they found out what was actually inside of that case,
That's
because it's a
right.
diamond worth millions and millions of dollars.
That's right. So with such a
like-
simple idea, we could make things much more rich, and I think that'd be a lot of fun to figure out how to do and to see in action.
Well, the other thing too is, if the game gets even remotely successful with more than 20 people, then
I consider that successful.
I'm just saying, you've got to weigh the probability that anybody is. It's like, who's going to be hunting me down specifically for this one quest?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, even in EVE, I've gone through zero sec space without turning on my cloaking device just to see what would happen. You know what happened? Nothing. Because it just so happened at that time in that place, there was nobody around. I had nothing to worry about. I shouldn't be out there. I have no idea how to take on these great big old pirates who just kill everything
You
in
wouldn't
sight.
even see them. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just bang.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
I've been
There is that-
multi-ganked.
you've been multi-ganked in security space.
Yeah.
So
It's like standing on the edge of a cliff, isn't it? There's that tiny part of your mind that says, "Go on, jump."
like in this case, and I know I'm trying to bring it back, but kind of slowly, because I realize there is a concern as soon as you make make available the information of like what players are on what quests, that there is that concern of, oh well, what about quest hijacking? But I don't think that should be like a driving factor to determine whether or not we should do it.
Right.
Because if there really was a lot of skill that you'd had to train up and a lot of hoops you got to go through just to even get access to that, then you as the quest taker, the person who's got to deliver the package, you got to think, all right, wait a minute. Somebody's got to know that this quest is out there. They have to know its worth. Then they have to know that I have that quest. To even know that, they have to have this train, this train, this train, and this train. Then they've got to be able to track me down. There's probably 20 different routes I can take to get from the beginning of the quest to the end of the quest. They've got to figure out which one I'm going to take, or they have to wait for me at the end and hope that I brush by them. It's like there's so many opportunities to slip by or thwart the danger that it adds a cool aspect. And if anybody's willing to go through that many hoops to kill some poor guy who's dragging a package from A to B, rock on. That's my take on it anyway.
It's the sort of player we want.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, if we had that kind of information available, here's kind of, this may be like one stage further than we need to talk about this, but I would keep things like eBay in mind. And I'm going to put that in quotes. The reason I mention that is like, okay, I'm just assuming that all of you have bought or at least looked at something on eBay at one point. If you take a look at previous bids, as long as it's not the silent auction type, because there are in eBay you can put something up for sale where bids are kind of quiet and you just type in a number and hope it's the right number. But most of them aren't that way. Most of them you can see a bidding history. And the way they handle it is that you have like A asterisk Y has bid, $500. And then this random name, which is it's just some sort of, strange little identifier which, may represent a person that may not, bid 501. If you could see information like this that was kind of anonymized, so that you can say, all right, well, there are maybe at one level of skill, if you wanted to tie skill into it, so you can bring this all back around. Maybe at one level of skill, all you can see is, there are 5 people on this quest. And then maybe at another level of skill, you could see not only that there are 5 people on the quest, but also that the first person to join it joined it, like 10 hours ago. Because that's important to know. If somebody joined that quest 10 hours ago, it's probably a safe bet if it's got like a 12-hour turnaround time that they should be pretty close to wrapping it up. Do you even want to bother? It's like they should be close to the finish line at this point. Is it even worth your time? And then as your skill gets higher, maybe you can start to see this
level.
You can start to see this list,
Yeah.
or you can start to see more and more information about what is and isn't available up to a point where maybe, to get to, exactly, here's exactly who took it, and here's what time they picked it up, and here's the kiosk where they picked it up, and here's the projected meeting point. Maybe you actually need to do some sort of illicit behavior on the console to even, activate that. So having a high enough...
have pretty much specialized from the get-go in becoming an information specialist, only really trained as,
Sure.
the necessary skills for that.
Exactly. And there's a lot of ways you can work that in. Is it some level of hacking, or is it just a skill unto itself where, I am at one with these job kiosks. I can touch my finger to it and tell you, where everyone is in the world. And that's fine, but that's kind of the way I was picturing it, where you just kind of start with very, very simple skill, or maybe no information if you're not trained in that at all. You just see that here's a quest, it's got a 12-hour turnaround time. Do you want to take it, yes or no? And then the more you train into this particular unnamed skill that we haven't really discussed, the more you start to really work on that and develop it, you start to get access to more and more information. It does, in a way, I'll be the first to admit, potentially break a little bit of believability, because ideally, if you've got a kiosk with a user interface, either the interface is presenting the data or it's not presenting the data. So I realize that we've got to kind of stretch beyond that a little bit. We've got to say.
I think that is quite
assumed at this
trivial
point.
in terms of
I would hope that that's assumed
problem
at this
more
point.
than
I just wanted to say that in case anybody had that on their brain. Okay, so really, in terms of the limited quests, that's the bulk of what I had. So I think this is a really good place to kind of stop the discussion.
Sure. Was there anything else in regards to limited quests that any of the three of you would like to add?
I was just going to say that the key, presumably you're going to be, when you're offered one of these quests, it's going to tell you whether it's once accepted, it locks out or not.
Yeah, originally, for some reason in my head, honestly, I had it locked that it would have to be one of these or the other. And after hearing everybody talk, it's like, you know what, they're right. It doesn't really have to be that way. It could just be quest dependent. Some missions it might make sense. Other missions maybe not so much. So if somebody's putting one of these together themselves, probably best to let them decide.
But what I'm saying is, when you go up to someone and they offer you a quest, you'll be told, presumably, that this is an open quest or this is a closed quest.
Yes. Now, I do want to ask this before we completely close, and maybe this is something where you guys will have to say, well, let me think about it and get back to you, but on a fundamental conceptual level, can you guys think of any other really core key category aside from these open and limited quests? In the way that I'm thinking about it, in terms of time sensitivity. I couldn't, and so I'm just asking if anybody else could.
There are variations on a theme, but you could have a open quest that becomes limited after a set period of time, as in this quest giver will disappear in 12 hours. So logically, you have 12 hours left to complete this quest.
Or an interesting thing that just brought to mind is one could kind of flip over to the other. So it's almost like you have a last call sort of thing. So
well, actually, I was just thinking that somebody's setting up a publican is going into business. There's going to be an open quest. He's going to need a lot of beer and a lot of food.
Right.
But then once he gets it up and running, once he's opened after opening night, he's going to need a steady, slow turnover of beer. So then it becomes moves from one to the other.
Well, what I was thinking was, if you hold on to a quest, like an open quest beyond its window, you could, as opposed to just shutting it down, saying, thank you, good night, we don't need any more of these, say that kind of morphs over into a limited quest, saying you've now got 3 hours to get that done. Because the window's now shut, but you already did accept it, so we'll give you this kind of 3-hour grace period to close this out and get finished with what you were doing.
Yeah, really, I think certainly you should. That's one key thing to remember, is that you should find, if we're implementing mobile services in this game, definitely need reminders that you need to finish this quest now.
Sure. And maybe not. Maybe, that sort of grace period is just a little bit too nice, where it's like, you did agree to get this done sometime in the window, and if you fail, you're just a failure.
Well,
I think for the longer quests, it's one of those things about, but real life can get in the way.
Right.
Oh yeah, but all I'm talking about is a button on your UI that says, remind me at 12 hours before, or however long. So it's up to it is up to the player to decide whether or not to give them
to initiate
but you make it easy for them. If they remember, you make it easy. If they don't, then they're lost.
Yep. Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap this video up, and we will be back in the next to continue the discussion on quests. Thanks a lot.